Aloha, everybody. I'm Eva Andrade, and on this episode of Faith in Politics, we're going to continue our discussion on immigration. We're going to talk about religious freedom, and we're going to answer the question, could Roe versus Wade be overturned? Let's chat about that. This week, I had the honor and privilege to watch my grandson graduate high school. Shout out to Mililani High School. And over 600 students gathered at the Aloha Stadium with social distancing in place. And they were allowed to bring 2 adults with them, normally your parents or guardian. And the way they had that set up is that on the field, there were pods of 3. So you had the student in the middle and then the parents or guardians on the other side. And everybody else could park in the parking lot and watch the graduation on a Jumbotron TV, old style movie. And the rest of the people were given a link so they could watch it live. And I think that most people, when they're watching a graduation, they think about their own graduations. And here in Hawaii, the presence of lei is very important. In fact, I don't believe there is any more beautiful graduations than right here in the state of Hawaii because of how beautiful that is with your lei. Each senior was allowed only 1 lei per adult that was with them. So I thought that was kind of interesting that in the presence of the stadium, each student only had 2 leis. In the good old days, you couldn't even see the faces of some graduate because the leis would be piled up so high upon that. And that didn't happen at this event. The class president said something in her speech that really struck me. She welcomed the seniors to their first senior meeting and their last. Sadly, the class of 2021 had no junior prom last year, no senior prom this year, no homecoming game, no senior pranks. And some of the students made comments that they didn't even recognize their classmates because they didn't see them so long. Most people, especially teenagers, they thrive on social gatherings. And I give these students so much I just give them applause for everything that they did because they were courageous to make it through these challenging years. And I commend the teachers who also had to navigate a very tricky shutdown. And I thought of my grandson, who's never going to have all of those moments I mentioned earlier. Philippians 3:13 through 15, it says, "Brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead. I press on toward the goal to win the prize of God's heavenly calling in Christ Jesus." All of us who are mature should embrace this point of view. And if you think differently about some issue, God will reveal that to you as well. We can't replace anything that was missed on this educational journey for the class of 2021, but we can pray that your future holds many blessings. Maybe, just maybe, some of you will be called to higher office. And this experience will mean a deeper understanding and wisdom to handle the unplanned events of the future and in our lives, and that will happen. Buildings can be closed, but our minds and hearts should never be. Congratulations to all the graduates of 2021. Go towards your prize. You earned it. And that's my thought for this week.
So I would like to have been in the meeting at the school where they were deciding to limit the lei. Were they limiting the lei because they didn't want that many people in contact with the graduate? Or were they limiting the lei? This is my cynical nature, because some kids don't get as many as the other kids. And if they were doing it because of the first reason, they could have figured out a way to let you and your brother bring lei from your entire family so that Darian's face would be obscured by the lei.
I know.
If it was because of equity in lei giving, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, they never said what the reason was. And it was a beautiful graduation for what they had to do. And you know what? We have to be grateful that it was at least in person, right? Because the graduates last year, if I'm not mistaken, most of the schools, they had drive-through graduation, right? The kids had to come in and drive through to get their diploma. So at least the kids got to walk up on the stage.
Well, you could also say these kids are so lucky that they live in the 21st century, because in the 16th century, they didn't even have high school. They all worked all the time.
Well, exactly. And so kind of how I want to start this is a lot of people feel like that this is really an attack on freedoms, right? So everything right now is about an attack on freedom. You've got a lot of people in the community who are really angry at the lockdown and what it has meant for them. Everything from, and I know that recently there is a big talk right now, especially on religious freedom, because of a speech that was just recently given. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Are we going to play it?
Yes, we're going to play a quick clip, and then I want to get your thoughts on the clip.
Let me just say a few words about why this report matters. Religious freedom is a human right. In fact, it goes to the heart of what it means to be human, to think freely, to follow our conscience, to change our beliefs if our hearts and minds lead us to do so, to express those beliefs in public and in private. This freedom is enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's also part of the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Our country's commitment to defending freedom of religion and belief goes back centuries. It continues today. Religious freedom, like every human right, is universal. All people, everywhere, are entitled to it, no matter where they live, what they believe, or what they don't believe. Religious freedom is co-equal with other human rights because human rights are indivisible. Religious freedom is not more or less important than the freedom to speak and assemble, to participate in the political life of one's country, to live free from torture or slavery, or any other human right. Indeed, they're all interdependent. Religious freedom can't be fully realized unless other human rights are respected. And when governments violate their people's right to believe and worship freely, it jeopardizes all the others. And religious freedom is a key element of an open and stable society. Without it, people aren't able to make their fullest contribution to their country's success. And whenever human rights are denied, it ignites tension, it breeds division.
So what you just heard is Secretary of State Anthony Blinken when he's telling reporters that, quote, religious freedom is not more or less important, end quote, than any other right. And I think, Jim, you probably take issue with that, don't you?
Well, in the context of what he was talking about on the international scene with countries that are theologically governed and countries that are governed by military strongmen, in addition to the Western countries that seem to be more interested in religious liberty. Religious liberty is a human right. In our own country, it's what's called a fundamental right. And fundamental rights actually do have higher legal protections than rights that are not fundamental rights when you go to court. But the interesting thing is, in other countries, because he was speaking internationally, if the government isn't protecting that human right, it's not a right at all, because the purpose of government under our Constitution is to protect our rights. And so, for instance, I don't know, in the Islamic Republic of Iran, where, let's say, if you want to start a evangelical church, they might prohibit it. You don't really have religious liberty because you can't do that because the government's not protecting your rights. So when I watched that, I thought, well, actually, his argument could have and should have been one of the reasons that the United States of America and its Constitution make us an exceptional country is because our government does strive to protect religious liberty.
Well, I'm curious because in the speech, when you watch it in its entirety, he makes a promise on behalf of the Biden administration that they are going to secure religious freedom for everybody, right?
Which they can't do.
Well, but isn't there kind of a misconstruence of what they're actually doing? Because when you think about like the Equality Act, right? There are a lot of religious institutions that take issue with that because that's going to be an attack on religious freedom. So how, on one hand, can you say that you're going to fight for religious freedom, but then on the other hand, you seem to be stripping it away? I mean, do you see that this is incongruent?
Sure. And it's politics, right? The political people in our country, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, or something else, they have to appeal to the people that support them so that they maintain their political power. The Biden administration, by and large, in the generalist statement, is more supported by anti-religious liberty people because the church disagrees with what they would like to be able to do. And so they would naturally disagree with the church. So then they would like the Equality Act to restrict the church. So it's just politics. And we talk about it quite often. Raw political power is not a good thing.
Well, I thought it was interesting because the speech should have been just about the report that he was giving a speech on, but he took the opportunity to, throw in some other things, in the beginning, at the end. And, what I'd really like to see on any politician, I don't care what side of the aisle they're on, is I'd like to see more focus and more honesty, rather than it being based on their political ideology. I want them to really give us something that's going to make a difference.
What you're basically saying in my lingo is you prefer a statesman to a politician. A statesman is a person that stands for whatever they stand for, and they will win or lose their election based on their stand. They won't change their position to get reelected.
Absolutely, because what I want to see in our leaders, and again, I'm not making any statement against any particular political party. I mean on the individual themselves, whoever they're representing. Come and tell me what it is you're going to do. Tell me how what you're going to do is going to benefit the whole community, and give me a chance to see inside your mind on how you're going to deal with those people that don't agree with you. What I'm tired of hearing, and I think most Americans are tired of hearing, is, well, here's what I believe because the idiot who came before me did this and I have to fix their bad problem. Okay, you know what? We do, in order to fix the problem, you do have to address it. You do. But stop with all of this hate and rhetoric. Instead of picking on one group of people, which seems to be the conservatives these days, how about we just start moving forward with what is going to benefit the wider community and not just one political party? And while I'm on my soapbox, by the way, the other thing that really irks me is when I hear somebody say, all Americans feel this way, because I'm sitting there going, all Americans do not feel this way. When we did our survey, one of the things that was very clear is even in the conservative community, there is difference of opinions. We all stand on certain principles. And I think that's where we should start and move forward.
So whenever we talk about this critical race theory issue, I always hearken back to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. And I think maybe in a week or two, I'm going to have a segment on why character is important, because it's the individual's character that should make a difference, not the group the person belongs to. And if our politicians took that tack, then they wouldn't be making you upset, because they wouldn't be, shooting arrows at groups of people they disagree with, because it's actually not a group issue. It's an individual issue, personal responsibility.
I am the product of Catholic school. And one of the things I remember one of the teachers said to me, and it really has had a profound impact on me, is this teacher said, character is what you do when no one else is looking. And I
think the Apostle Paul said that.
Okay, well, maybe they were quoting. Well, sometimes you can quote scripture without quoting scripture.
Absolutely.
And actually, as Christians, that's how we should be living our lives. We don't have to tell everybody that the Bible says in such and such. If we're living it and people are attracted, kind of like, a moth to the flame, people should be attracted to us because of the aroma, going back to the lay, which is kind of in my little weird thoughts this morning. That's what I was thinking about, right? Is that what are we putting out to the community and attracting people? And when we come back, Jim Hochberg is going to take us into a whole new world. So with Aladdin, let's wait and see what he's got to tell us. So we'll be right back.
Hey everybody, we're here at the Hawaii Prayer Breakfast, and we have the CEO of the Prayer Breakfast as well as one of the major sponsors. Matt, how are you this morning?
I'm good, thank you.
What do you think? How are you feeling about the event so far?
Yeah, we're very honored to have this much people, especially the first event since COVID closure. So it's an honor to have one person here.
Obviously, you've put a lot of effort into this, so prayer is a very important thing for you. What does prayer mean to you?
everything is birthed by prayer. Everything. So I've really taken that to heart and tried to pass that down not only to my family, to my colleagues, to the Hawaii Prayer Breakfast, but just the communities at large,
Well, enjoy the morning, and thank you so much for putting this on and organizing it. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. God bless you guys.
We have a mission here at Kalo TV. We continue to be the only local, Christ-centered media outlet in Hawaii. God has planted this station to nourish believers and to harvest souls for eternity. It's a calling we hold dear, and today we need your help. Partner with us as we continue to create original local programs.
We're so very grateful for that whole journey.
Walking down to our story room.
Oh my God!
So it's where the state cannot tell the church how to run their services, what songs to sing.
Showcase solid biblical teaching.
We reach more people in one day with the broadcast of the gospel.
It's music to God's ears.
Improve our infrastructure and influence social media. In these dark and disruptive times, there's never been a greater need to be rooted in God's Word. The Kalo plant has been a sustaining food in Hawaii for centuries, and Kalo TV aims to bring much needed spiritual nutrition to these islands. Are you willing to labor with us for Hawaii, for your ohana, for the next generation? Go to kalotv.com and partner with us today.
Welcome back to Faith in Politics. So, Eva, a lot of people are talking to me in the last week about the fact that the United States Supreme Court has agreed to hear a case out of the state of Mississippi. It's Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Services. Jackson being Jackson, Mississippi, right? And people seem to think the overturning of Roe v. Wade is the target. And so I read the briefs that the Dobbs, the governor submitted, and the Planned Parenthood affiliate submitted. And it's actually not really about overturning Roe v. Wade at all. It's kind of interesting. So I don't think the court has to do that. They've agreed to take the case, which is really interesting. But what I wanted to do is talk about what is this case about and what's happening. And there were some things in the briefs that really startled me. Number one being, did you know that people that support life in the womb through birth, do you know what they're called now?
Oh, yes, please share, because I love this.
Forced birth advocate.
So people should get T-shirts that say, I'm a forced birth advocate.
Well, I don't know, but how do you force a birth? You just don't let them get an abortion. I mean, that's weird. But anyway, that's labeling. So anyway, okay. So before Roe v. Wade, which was 1973, people were pregnant from the beginning.
People were not pregnant.
People that were pregnant.
Women.
Women that got pregnant.
Yes.
Not all women were pregnant. The ones that got pregnant were pregnant from the beginning until the birth, unless there was a miscarriage or something in the middle. Doctors in the medical field would be concerned about viability if there was an issue with the baby in utero. Viability wasn't a legal term or a political term until 1973. Roe v. Wade pegged viability as the starting point for the state's ability to regulate abortion. Before viability, Roe v. Wade said, you can't interfere with a woman's right to get an abortion because it's her body before the baby's viable, which interestingly enough, I want to read the definition of viability, which both briefing parties in this particular case agreed to this definition. Viability means a reasonable likelihood of the baby's survival outside the womb with or without artificial support. And
I think even doctors can't really answer that definitively, right?
Well,
Because
so that's a great point, and that's one of the things that makes this case so interesting. In 1973, medical science was medical science in 1973.
Right.
Since then, it has grown exponentially in terms of the ability to know about in vitro life. They can do surgery in vitro now and all kinds of things, right? So the scientific knowledge increase allows doctors to better understand fetal development, and the technology increase allows for viability outside the womb at an ever increasingly younger age of the baby. 1973, viability became a legal political issue because of abortion. So in 2018, this is 21, so that's how long these cases take. The Mississippi legislature passed what they called the Gestational Age Act.
And let's please remember that Mississippi is a red state, right? It's Republican controlled. So, and the reason I say this, Jim, is because
people are going to call you and say, why can't we
do
get
that right here in Hawaii? Yes, it's not going to happen. So pro-life people out there, understand that we get it. Okay, we'd love to have something like this in Hawaii, but anyway, go ahead, Jim.
So pro-life people out there, let's start voting for pro-life candidates in the legislature.
Well, let's define pro-life, because we've had many candidates that claim to be pro-life, and then they vote opposite to that because they say, I have to listen to my constituency. So that's a whole nother show.
So we're back to the statesman.
Yes.
Okay. So the Gestational Age Act prohibits abortion after 15 weeks gestation. Gestation is started from the last menstrual cycle that the pregnant mom had. From there forward, 15 weeks, then very limited opportunity for abortion. Very, very, very limited. 15 weeks, both parties agree, is before viability in most cases. So what the Mississippi legislature said was, we want to do this because we want to protect the mother's health. We want to protect the dignity of the unborn baby, which was kind of interesting, and the integrity of the medical profession and the integrity of society as a whole. So that was kind of interesting. They said that surgical abortion has way more medical dangers after the 15th week. And after the 15th week, they almost have to be the D&E surgical abortions. Up to the 15th week, at the 15th week, the fetal development of the baby is so significant that all the basic physiological functions are happening and pain awareness is there and stuff like that.
Yeah, I want to just briefly bring something up because it touches that, Jim, is that so Heritage Foundation, Susan B. Anthony, there's a lot of good groups out there that put out information. And so people are clear, 15-week gestation babies, this is what they're saying. They have fully developed hearts.
So I got that right here.
Oh, okay. Well,
No, go ahead.
Okay. So pumping 26 quarts of blood per day. They have arms and legs, fingers and toes, nails and developing fingertips. They have fully formed noses and lips. They can taste. They can make facial expressions, yawn, hiccup, swallow, suck their thumbs. In fact, there's a lot of pictures of babies doing that. They have fully formed eyelids and eyebrows, and they feel pain.
Correct. So all of those factors are in the governor's brief because at the trial court, the court wouldn't allow that evidence to be considered because viability is the test under Roe v. Wade.
Right.
And so when you file a lawsuit, you have to be within the umbrella of current law, but you are allowed to argue for reasonable changes to the law, which is what this is doing, right? So it's almost like they probably knew they were going to lose at the trial court. And so what they're saying is all of this evidence that we provided, the judge didn't consider, and he was wrong for that, or maybe it was a woman, she, I don't know. And so Supreme Court, would you please rule on the question, not whether Roe v. Wade is unconstitutional or bad law, but whether the viability test is not the best test. The better test is what's best for the dignity of the baby because of these factors, and also society and the medical profession and the mother. And here's the interesting thing. What they said about the medical profession is there are only 7 countries that permit abortion after 20 weeks. The United States of America is one of 7 shameful countries. Shameful that allow abortion after 20 weeks of gestation. And 20 weeks is a number that came from somewhere with medical technology in the past. Now they're saying 15 weeks, you've got all of these factors in the baby. Why do we want our medical profession and our society to be in this group of shameful 7 countries? Which I thought that's a really good argument, actually. And so the question is, what's going to happen? So what did the Planned Parenthood side argue? Here's what they argued. They said, Supreme Court, viability is the law. It's the law of the land. Don't even answer this question.
Okay. Sounds like a parent telling
which is,
kid.
Because I said so. Let the circuit court law stand, walk away, use viability as the rule. Now, there are 9 justices on the Supreme Court. So I was looking at them, lining them up, trying to figure out what's what. I don't really know what's in their minds. This is complete speculation, but it's based on information that's up until today. So I'm speculating Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor, and Stephen Breyer will all be Planned Parenthood supporters and say viability is a good rule. Let's keep it. We don't care if the medical science changed so that we know about the fetal development that we didn't know in 1973. We know about viability outside the womb with new technology we didn't have back then. So that's those 3. I think I can be sure that Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, and Sam Alito will be for determining, asking the question and answering it. Is maybe viability not any longer scientific? Follow the science, not the scientifically best way to solve this problem. I'm not sure where to put Brett Kavanaugh. I might put him in with them, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 3. The question is going to be Kavanaugh, but more than that, John Roberts.
Yes.
And if Kavanaugh and Roberts join together so that it's 4 to 3 to 2, that would be an interesting way that it breaks down. But again, it's all speculation. But there's a probably 50-50 chance that they'll all chicken out and say, we don't want to change Roe v. Wade viability rule because it's been relied on for almost 50 years, that whole thing. That's a possibility too.
Okay. And I want people to understand too that even if, and I realize it's a stretch, but even if Roe versus Wade is overturned at some point, whether it's through this process or another, Hawaii will still have legalized abortion on demand because we have a Freedom of Choice Act here, which means that if it goes back to the states, Hawaii protects abortion. So,
well, it's even broader than that because this is only Mississippi's law.
Right.
If the Mississippi legislature wins, it only applies to Mississippi.
Right. Well, and then that's why I want to talk about that, because again, we always have people that think that one decision somewhere affects everybody, and it really doesn't. And even if for some reason Roe versus Wade was overturned, because that's really the question people keep thinking on this case.
But it's not the right question. It's should the test change?
Right. And so let's make that clear, because what we want to do is always provide people the proper information.
We want our viewers to be smart
and be educated. And we also don't want them to be arguing, that no, this is going to, because it's like, no, let's be honest here that, well, first of all, Planned Parenthood is very good at what they do. They've got a lot of money, and they've got great communications. They're able to do a lot of things that faith-based groups are not allowed to do.
Well, and we in the last seconds got to also put in there, court packing is in the back of the minds of the Supreme Court justices.
Yes. And I encourage people always to look at what's being produced by some of these groups, because you got to know what they're saying in order to combat it. And we'll put the links to the Charlotte Lozier Institute, the Family Research Council, Alliance Defending Freedom. We've got Heritage Foundation, Susan B. Anthony. There's a lot of good information to help counteract some of this stuff that's out there right now. And when we come back, we're going to jump into the conversation that we kind of got short-sighted on last week, which is immigration. And when you're born, you become a human life, and that does affect where you go and what you do. So let's continue the conversation. We'll be right back. Aloha, I'm Eva Andrade. I'm the president and CEO of Hawaii Family Forum. And Hawaii Family Forum has been serving the faith-based community right here in Hawaii since 1998. What we do is we identify like-minded people in the community, we educate them, we motivate them, and then we activate them, standing on the foundational principles of Micah 6:8, which says, "What does the Lord require of you but to love justice and to do mercy and to walk humbly with your God?" So join us at hawaiifamilyforum.org and let's make a difference right here in this beautiful state of Hawaii. Mahalo.
I have my beautiful wife with me, Sharon. Yeah, it's so good to be with everybody here. And of course, we have Pastor Tony Evans and Priscilla Shire with us. Did you see a star in the making when she was a little
She was like this as a little girl.
Running around?
Yeah, running around. Yeah, she always was an actress kind of personality. She liked to get attention and give attention. And she was always putting on a show of some kind. Yeah, and then she would walk around. She'd take a brush.
Okay, this is
and walk around the house performing. There's a crisis need for men to man up, to be what we call kingdom men, and to rise up to the responsibility that God calls us to.
So, hey, I'm going to ask you right now. I wasn't planning on this. I'm sorry, producer Malala, but you got to come back and do a men's conference.
Hey, that would be great. All you got to do is invite me.
Okay.
That's all you got to do is invite me.
We're done. We're doing it. Okay, that's the end, everybody. Oh, no, we'll keep going. Okay, sorry.
Welcome back to Faith in Politics. You're listening on K-Light Radio and watching on Kalo TV. Jim.
Yes.
We ran out of time last week when we were talking about immigration. We were actually specifically...
We just dripped a little.
We dripped a little.
Just a
you
little.
gave us a little bit of a teaser. But basically, we really wanted to focus on the survey that Representative Ed Case did on the immigration issue. And I know you've got a lot of thoughts on that. And I think a lot of people want to know what your thoughts are. I know there are people out there that have been waiting all week to hear the thoughts of Jim Hochberg on immigration. So go.
I feel very sorry for them. There were so many things they could have been enjoying. So I don't believe you. But so Ed Case is our congressman, one of our two congressmen. Immigration is an issue in Congress. Ed Case is a Democrat member of Congress. He sent out via email, because I got one and filled one out, a questionnaire for a poll that we were talking about, the survey results from April. So when I was taking the poll and I was answering the questions based on the options, because it was multiple choice like the one that you did, I realized that he wasn't really a statesman in his approach. He was a politician in his approach. And the reason I say that is the one thing that he did not ask is probably the most important question to ask. But it's not part of the Democratic Party approach to immigration.
And what question is that?
Do you think employers should be prosecuted who hire undocumented illegal immigrants? That's not on the poll. That's the reason they come, because they get jobs. Or they come because they're part of a drug cartel employment scheme, so they don't have to work for a farmer, they're going to be selling drugs or whatever.
Well, and here in Hawaii, there's a lot of immigrants who work, especially in like farming and that sort of thing.
Kunia's got huge farms. Waianae's got huge farms, sure. And the neighbor islands. So his first question was, what best reflects your view on the immigration system? And the choices were, it's broken, it needs comprehensive reform, it's working, needs targeted reform, it's working and does not need reform. The immigration system includes legal and illegal immigration. So that was kind of, in my opinion, an unnecessary question.
Well, and it
didn't help anything.
And when I look at that, though, again, the big thing about surveys is how it's worded, right?
Correct.
And those first two are so close. One says comprehensive reform. The other one says targeted reform. But the key word there is reform.
Well, it's a Democratic approach. It's not a statesman's approach. That's my whole point.
Well, yeah. And so I'm agreeing with you, but the point that I'm making is 73% said comprehensive and 24% said targeted. So what that tells me is
Almost
everybody says reform needs to happen. Fix the darn problem.
And then the rest of it's talking about how the reform can happen. And the one thing that was left out of the reform is actually enforce the law on the books now.
I tell you what really bursts my bubble. And I mean, I've been getting a little animated these past few shows because I think that what bothers me, Jim, is that there are people that have been in this country for a lot of years correctly. They're trying to get through the system the right way, and they are waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting to get this card and that card and to be able to do things legally in this state. And suddenly people who are coming in not the right way are jumping ahead of them in the line.
And they're getting free money. And they're getting free
something
education.
Is not right about that.
Healthcare.
And I think that every country has a right to come up with rules to make sure that people who come into a country are treated fairly, they're treated with dignity, but everybody should be treated in a way that provides dignity to that person who's coming in. And something's getting lost in all this.
Okay, so let's use some logic. You went to Catholic school. If anybody that can breach our, I won't even call it border, the edge of our country leaning up against the country next door, if anybody that can get in without approval is allowed to be in and become a citizen and vote and all that stuff, the question you have to ask is, what is the limiting factor? Does it go on forever and all of the billions of people in the world have the right to do that if they can get there? Well, then you don't have a country. I mean, seriously. That's one of the logical approaches. The other one has to do with, well, what can we actually afford to pay for as a country? And we've been printing so much money for so many things in the last 10 years, 20 years.
And a lot just in the last 6 months.
We actually can't afford anything, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
So if we want to have a country that has sovereignty against other nations, you have to have a border that you control. Otherwise, you don't have a nation. You don't. I mean, just by definition and logic.
And, do you agree? And this is how I feel, and see if you agree with this. Americans are very generous people. We have always been very generous people. When you look at the history of this country, we've been willing and able to help other nations when they've needed it. We've provided so much of our own resources over the years. But do you think we're getting taken advantage of now because of that generosity? Because when you talk to people, you have a position that the Republicans have taken on immigration. You have a position that Democrats have taken on immigration. But we know we have a great country. We really do. The potential of this country is phenomenal. And we'd love everybody to be Americans. But is it our responsibility to make everybody in the world Americans? Everybody comes so we can all be Americans? Or do we teach other nations how to be more democratic so that they can have good nations? I mean, where we want to take that responsibility because we're good people.
Well, so there's that nice political question, but that's not really what drives the issue. I think it's money. And there are big money interests that are involved in the politics in this country, and they like the employment services they get from the illegal immigrants. And there are global interests in that business money scenario that have also financial interests in it. So the generosity of America is actually expressed through the exercise of political power in Congress, because the states tried to protect themselves, and the Supreme Court rightly said the Constitution gives immigration authority to Congress, because you don't want two states next to each other having different immigration policies with respect to Mexico or Canada or a country that's not adjacent. So it's the Congress and the political parties in Congress. I've read and I I speculate a lot on this show because I don't like to say things are true if I actually am guessing.
Well, and we've been very clear that a lot of things we talk about
But
are...
I have read that there are a lot of smart pundits, smarter than us, who see the Democratic Party interest in having illegal immigrants being able to vote is, since they're the ones that favor it, they're likely to be the ones that get those votes. And they say we got 11 million, but maybe there's 50 million, maybe, I don't know, right?
Well,
that's a lot of votes.
And we'll see in one of our coming shows. We'll talk a little bit more of the immigration voting issue because that does kind of come together. But let's get back to this Ed Case survey because I know you've got some thoughts on this. So the second question he asked is, which one of the following statements best reflects your views on legal immigration? Right. So now he's saying we're going to focus on legal immigration,
and remembering that legal immigration ends when the visa expires and that legal immigrant becomes an illegal immigrant. So that was another problem that I had with this. It didn't really give the person a smart choice.
Well, yeah. And I don't think anybody, even people that do this for a living, Jim, have a hard time articulating exactly what immigration is and does legally. Like, what is it? So he asked, so the choices were, the first one is legal immigration levels should be increased in specific areas. So, he's asking his participants to focus on the choices.
At the qualifiers.
Yeah.
Family reunification, which has a different name for the other side. Workforce needs, which is what I was talking about.
And the buzzword.
Diversity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he didn't say ability to add to the U.S. experience because of your education, your finances, any of that stuff. That got left out.
Yeah. And so 49% of the respondents actually agreed with that one. Now, what was interesting to me actually was the next three.
Okay.
Legal immigration levels are too high
and
they should be increased 19%. And then you've got legal immigration levels should be increased across the board 17. So you got 19%. That's pretty close when you look at this group of people. And then again, pretty close. Legal immigration levels are just right and should not be changed. So ignoring the 50% that agreed with his first part of this survey, that first one.
But see, if I had done this survey, I would have had another question in between there, which is asking about the flip side of, is it too high? Is it too low? Should handling illegal immigration affect the answer to this question? If legal immigration is too high and should be decreased, what if we eliminated illegal immigration? Would that change your answer? Or if legal immigration is too low and needs to be increased or decreased, whatever the other one was, would handling illegal immigration change your answer?
I want them to get even clearer than that. How about you ask people, if someone's been in the United States for 10 years, through our immigration laws and have not received citizenship yet, should our focus be on them or the people that have just crossed over yesterday?
So you mean the green card holders that legally came here and they're still waiting?
They're still waiting.
I think that's a great question.
And if you asked people that question, which one right now is an emergency? I'll bet you, though, a lot of people would say the people crossing the border are the emergency because they're here with nothing. The people who are here 10 years waiting, at least they probably got a job. They probably got you know what I mean? So people may not say, but my question is, again, talking about the dignity of the human person for that family who's waiting to get whatever paperwork, because I am no expert on immigration. I think that we need to be, that's the questions we need to ask people. These bubble questions, these word salad questions, I think do a disservice. And I'll take responsibility even for our own survey that maybe we didn't get quite as much as.
I thought yours was a lot better than this one. I do.
Oh, well, thank you, Jim.
And you didn't even ask me to review them, so I had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I got to take full responsibility for that myself. But so he asked a couple, and we'll just go this real quick. Which of the following best and anyway, maybe we'll continue this discussion on immigration moving forward. I mean, bits and pieces because I think it's important.
Okay.
So you're listening on K-Light Radio and you're watching Faith in Politics on Kahlo TV, and we want to hear from you. So when we come back, we're going to tell you how you can do that. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody, we're here at the Hawaii Prayer Breakfast and we have the CEO of the prayer breakfast, as well as one of the major sponsors. Matt, how are you this morning?
I'm good, thank you.
What do you think? How are you feeling about the event so far?
Yeah, we're very honored to have this much people, especially the first event since COVID closure. So it's an honor to have one person here.
Obviously, you've put a lot of effort into this, so prayer is a very important thing for you. What does prayer mean to you?
Everything is birthed by prayer, everything. So I've really taken that to heart and tried to pass that down not only to my family, to my colleagues, to the White Prayer Breakfast, but just the communities at large, you know.
Well, enjoy the morning, and thank you so much for putting this on and organizing it. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. God bless you guys.
We have a mission here at Calo TV. We continue to be the only local Christ-centered media outlet in Hawaii. God has planted this station to nourish believers and to harvest souls for eternity. It's a calling we hold dear, and today we need your help. Partner with us as we continue to create original local programs.
We're so very grateful for that whole journey.
Walking down to our story room.
Oh my gosh.
So it's where the state cannot tell the church how to run their services, what songs to sing.
Showcase solid biblical teaching.
We reach more people in one day with the broadcast of the gospel.
It's music to God's ears.
Improve our infrastructure and influence social media. In these dark and disruptive times, there's never been a greater need to be rooted in God's Word. The Calo plant has been a sustaining food in Hawaii for centuries, and Calo TV aims to bring much needed spiritual nutrition to these islands. Are you willing to labor with us for Hawaii, for your ohana, for the next generation? Go to calotv.com and partner with us today.
Welcome back to Faith in Politics. You're listening on K-Light Radio and you're watching on Calo TV. And as we wind up our show today, we're going to do two quick things. I think that we would do a disservice to our listeners and our viewers if we didn't at least address the shakeup in the House and the vote that happened with Liz Cheney. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Well, okay, so Liz Cheney was the top number 3 person in the Republican Party in the House of Representatives. She got that position because the Republicans in Congress voted for her to have that position. And then they voted for her not to have that position. And so she no longer has that position. So it's interesting to me how much chatter in the media that created, because there wasn't a whole lot of chatter when the Republicans in the past several elections agreed, we'll go with Mitt Romney, he's a moderate, but okay, we'll be nice and we'll support him, or Bob Dole, or, the Republicans finally, because of, I think, the presidency of Donald Trump, have realized that they actually can exert themselves as they will by their numbers. And so they have said, you are Liz Cheney, you are dividing our party in Congress because of your attacks on what happened on January 6th, when this is now May. 90% of the Republicans actually support Donald Trump. He still may be the future of our party. You're the wrong person to speak for us in the number 3 position in our caucus. That became a big conversation. I think it's basically the Republicans have got a little bit more grit now because of Donald Trump's presidency. And they're actually saying, we're not going to continue losing elections to be nice to the moderates. The American people, 75 million, voted for Donald Trump. They don't want squishy, almost Democrat Republicans.
Well, and I don't think it's helpful either when you're a politician and you come out and you speak very strongly against somebody in your party that you disagree with, because I think that, you have a right to do that. Obviously everybody's not going to agree even in the same party. So I'm not condemning that portion. What I am saying is that when you air your dirty laundry for the public to see, a house divided against itself cannot stand. I mean, the Bible tells us that. And here in Hawaii,
so did Abraham Lincoln.
We have our own issues right here in Hawaii with the Republican Party.
Always.
I'm talking about airing dirty laundry,
yes.
right? You get, when you have a group that all they want to do is focus on the negative, you're going to turn people off. And I think that there are a lot of young people, between the ages of 18 and 30. And I love throwing the 30 years old and young people. That's making them feel really good about themselves. But they are people without parties. They are disgusted with both parties and they don't have a home. And I think that that's why a lot of people are seeing this as an opportunity for maybe a third party to arise. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know, again, going back to my point earlier, if politicians would spend more time telling us what they're going to do in a positive way and how it's going to affect and benefit the entire population, I think, I think that we'd have better dialogue. Because if you told me, here's what I think here in Hawaii we should do to improve the lives of people, and I say to you, well, Jim, that's interesting, but here's what I think we should do to improve the lives of people. We may still be arguing, but at least we're both trying to do the best thing. This whole thing of, I don't like what you're saying, Jim Hochberg, so stop talking. You have no right to offer your opinion because it's different than mine. That's got to stop. And now the people on the liberal side are now feeling it too. I don't think that John Legend's wife is very happy right now that she's being canceled.
But she's not being canceled for political reasons. She was being very mean to people.
Well, but the point is, like, we don't like what you said.
Right.
And so now you don't have a right to say anything anywhere. And, freedom of speech is it's so overused right now. And I think that people have a misunderstanding of what the purpose of freedom of speech is. You've got an English leader, or, you have a royal living here in the United States. They don't have a First
Amendment in England.
They don't, but you don't.
No, but it makes a difference.
I would not, if I went to England, and I'm part English, I have Welsh blood, so props to the royal family.
That means you don't pay your debts, huh?
Jim. So if I went to England, I would offer all respect due to the royals, whether I'm part of the English culture. I would not go there and say, hey, let's talk about why there should be no royalty in England. I wouldn't do that. So I don't appreciate somebody from another country coming in and attacking our First Amendment rights.
Okay, so what did Donald Trump say about the defamation laws in England? He likes them because they don't have a First Amendment. The newspapers in England get sued all the time for saying untrue things about people. In America, you can't sue the press because of the First Amendment unless they meet this super high, crazy standard of either knowing that what they said was false or they were totally disregarding whether it was true or false, called actual malice. So our own president was saying, boy, I wish we had the system they have in England on the First Amendment, which is I can sue all the fake media here, which he can't.
Okay.
And so Harry was just saying, where I come from, the media doesn't get to do this stuff because they get sued.
Well, but it boils down to that he and his wife do not like what people are saying about them. So again,
and he's used to being able to sue.
Yes.
Over it.
And so I think the point here is that we definitely need to do a segment on the freedom of speech because I think it would be very interesting to people. So let's shift gears, Jim. We've got a couple of shout outs to do. I'd like to give a shout out to Richard. Richard watches the show and, we do a little bit of a chat when the live is happening. We thank Richard for that. Shout out to Judy Lum, who sent an email. Basically, she's opposed to vaccination. So she's been sending us information on vaccination so that we can stay up on what's happening on vaccination. We are going to talk more about vaccinations, hopefully in next week's show. That's the plan.
And so last month, Leona sent an email. We talked a little bit about last week, but I really wanted to address it because she says she thinks that each state should have the same voting power in Congress, regardless of how many residents live in the state, and should give each state equal voting powers. And I like that because she's thinking. But I want to help us think in the broader perspective, which is the founding fathers didn't want the states to have equal voting power because there was a growth happening in the country, and we're getting more illegal immigrants. We're getting more legal immigrants. People are being born. People are moving. The way the founders put the Congress together is
no history lesson. We've only got a couple minutes.
People vote for House of Representatives based on how many people live in the state, and that's why the House of Representatives has 436 members for 50 states. The big population states have more votes. Lower population states have fewer. But the Senate was originally 2 guys each elected by the state legislatures to protect the legislature. Both groups would solve all our problems fairly. It's not the same anymore.
Okay. And maybe we'll talk more about that in a future show. I also want to give a shout out to Thor, who attends Calvary Chapel. Honolulu, listens to K-Light, and gave a shout out to all of us for the show, the team behind the scenes, and special shout out to Jake. So we want to thank you, Thor, for your email, and to Roxanne, who actually took she was listening to what you were saying about writing a letter, and as a University of Hawaii alum, she wrote a letter a letter because of what's happening in the University of Hawaii, and we are specifically going to talk about that on the next show. So you want to stay tuned. So we've got a couple of things that we want to do just to end the show. We want to hear from you, and we're giving away this wonderful...
Okay, what you got?
We got here a K-Light mug, and it is a beautiful shirt. So the first person that sends an email to me at eva@kalotv.com, you're going to get this wonderful gift. We've got some pocket constitutions we want to continue to give away. Send an email to eva@kalotv.com. We'll send you one of those. We want you to partner to make this show possible. Send a check to Kalo TV and find out how you can be one of our sponsors for this show. So make sure you do that. And stay tuned for next week when we talk about more things that are important to you in respect to faith, family, and freedom. You're watching Faith in Politics on Kalo TV and listening on K-Light Radio. We'll see you next week. Mahalo, everybody.